taught me how to live. Daddy taught me how to give. Both of them had their own sins. Down to the river, every man has felt the shame. All our blood, it runs the same. Father, hear us as we pray. Down to the river, down to the river. Sing, oh, oh, bury me, carry me, oh, oh, far beneath, oh, oh, fire and water me, going down deep, singing, oh, oh, bury me, carry me, oh, oh, far beneath, oh, oh, fire and water me, watching me think everything.
Hi, welcome to Cryptid Wilderness Research. I am CWR team member Daniel Becker here in Alaska. Not with us tonight, my fellow host Matt Slater down in Washington State. He is a bit under the weather, so we wish him the best and a speedy recovery. Joining us tonight, CWR researcher, consultant, and partner, part of our CWR network. We love having her on from South Carolina, Robin Haynes. Robin, welcome.
Thanks. I'm so glad to be here tonight.
We always love having you on, like I said. So down in the Carolinas, obviously the Carolinas have been in the news a lot lately with the devastation that's taken place down there due to the hurricanes. So when it comes to cryptids, when it comes to Bigfoot, I have to ask, what do the Bigfoot do during these hurricanes? Do they know that large weather systems like this are coming? Do they try to escape the area? What happens with the Bigfoot during these storms?
Well, when it comes to hurricanes, tornadoes, that kind of weather, it's a major frequency change. It changes the frequency. They are high frequency beings. They are very much aware that things are coming like that. When it changes the atmosphere, when it changes the energy, when it changes the frequency, that's the first tip off for them. Now, they are also very much like us, where you will have some that will try to get away from it. Most of them will stand and stay with their homes. You will occasionally find some of them that will try to go to a safer place. But like us, like when they evacuated Florida, and when they tried to evacuate Georgia and North Carolina, they really, some people will go and some people will try to stay at their homes. They just will, to try to protect their house. It's the same way with them. But they can do anything from try to walk out to portal out to go underground, although with the hurricane in the water, that's always not the best idea. But they're intelligent and they're very, very smart. And they will try to go to places where they can just hunker down. Now, the ones that are here by me in South Carolina, I noticed they cleared out 2 days before it hit. They were very much aware of it. They were not nervous, but they were very focused on it. They did not take off. They were not active. They went either into, if there's cave systems around, they would go there. They would go underground. They would, like I said, they'll portal out. A lot of them don't. Again, it comes down to that clan. Is that clan one that will use the paranormal abilities to get out of there? Or are they going to hunker down and try to stay? I'm not going to say, I have not heard personally of any of them that did not survive it. My guess would be that, like our people, they probably did have some casualties. That first one was really bad. In my area, when the second one came in, we did not have a problem because I'm not down by the coast. The first one was horrific. We did far better than Georgia, North Carolina, Tennessee. There were parts of South Carolina that got hit real hard. My guys were gone a couple of days after. They left a couple days before. I did call out to them to try to make sure everybody was okay, was everybody safe? And they were still around here. They did not leave the area. And, I've lived here 6 years, and we've always had a couple hurricanes a year. And at no time did they leave. Do I believe that in certain areas they left? Absolutely. Absolutely. But I think, again, they are a type of people. And even with our people during hurricane season, some of us stay and some of us leave, depending on how bad that location is. I think if they're down by the coast, I think that some would leave. Do I think all of them left? Absolutely not. I really don't think they were. I know from when I was in Michigan and we would get the tornadoes and the bad weather, they have this where they would stay at. I mean, it's pretty well protected. When they took me into their area where their actual homes where they lived at, it was storming outside and there was not one drop of water in there. Now to sustain the winds from a hurricane, that's a little bit different, but they are really intelligent. And I think they actually far better than we do.
So right there, you mentioned when they took you into their homes. Tell us about these homes that you saw.
It was so crazy because I did not know that's where I was going. I didn't. It was like 11:30, 12 o'clock at night. They wanted me outside. And I just felt like, for whatever reason, I had to go. I mean, I literally called a babysitter to stay with my kids, went out in the middle of the night. I had another friend that wanted to go with me. They didn't want that person around because they wanted me by myself. So I actually ditched them. I had 2 friends that went, and I ditched them because the Sasquatch were telling me where to go, and I didn't know where I was going. I mean, this was in an area that I had never been before, and it was just like I was on autopilot, and I knew where I was going. And I came to this one area. It was just this massive area of woods in a circular form, but you couldn't get into it. Like, there was no way into this woods. The brush was so thick. You couldn't see into it. You couldn't penetrate it to get it into. They told me to touch the bush. They said, just put your hand on the bush. And I'm like, okay. So I put the hand on my hand on the bush. Next thing I know, I saw a bunch of sparkly gray flashes. And the next thing I know, I'm standing on the inside of this thing. And there were 8, you can call them houses or nests, whatever you want to call them. There were 8 of them. The back of it all was into the middle, and they were put in a circular pattern. So the opening to them went out in a circle around, so that if anybody came in, no matter which way they came in, there was no way somebody could come in there without being seen. The base of it was like 4 foot off the ground, and there was brush all underneath of it. And each one of these units were the size of a 2.5 car garage. I mean, they were massive. And each one, while it was approximately 4 foot off the ground with brush underneath of it, there were branches that went over the top of it, woven together. So it was like going into a tunnel. It was like Big Bird's nest with a top. And it was just enormous. And I walked up to it, and it was weird. It was like all the way that went around it, there was no excess room. It was all these little units. And the back of each one all met in the middle, and they faced outward. But there was a path that went all the way around all 8 units. And it would look like if somebody were out in the woods and saw a deer run, that's what it looked like. And I remember being in there and thinking, if it were a deer run and the deer ran, there was literally nowhere I could go. You could either jump into one of these units or fall into the brush. There was no walking around or anything like that. There was this path that went around these units, and there was like 8 of them. And I walked up to one, and I was like, something told me to get inside of it. And then I thought better of it, and I was like, no, I'm just not going to do that. And I heard a noise, and I turned around, and there was a male, a female, and a small little girl, a Sasquatch there. And they were standing there, and they were mind speaking to me. They never tried to come towards me. They never were aggressive. They were just the male never said anything. It was mainly the female that did, and the child never said anything. And I heard my friends out on the outside, but it was like the whole thing. You would never know when you walked by this area what was on the inside of it. I mean, it was just crazy. It was like almost like you would see in the movies where it was like a protected area and they changed the outside of it. I mean, it was really weird. definitely an eye-opener for me, because that is not what I expected at all. And I didn't even know that I was going to be going there. I mean, they just wanted me outside, and they did that every night anyway. And so when my friends got close, the female said I had to leave because they couldn't be found. And I said, I don't know how I got in here, so I clearly don't know how to get out. And she said, just touch the bush. I said, okay. So I went over and put my hand on the bush, and the same thing happened. I was on the outside. That woods was impenetrable. I mean, I don't know if it was a portal I went through. I mean, had never been at that point. I'd not been in a portal. That's the only thing that I could think of that made sense. I didn't have scratches on me from brush. I don't remember going through any brush. I simply put my hand on a bush both times. And it was incredible. I felt so blessed to have even been allowed to see it. But just the way the layout was absolutely incredible. I mean, the back of these units all met in the middle, and they flowered out in a complete circle. I mean, there's no way you could have ever gotten in there without someone seeing you. Where the rest of them were, I have no idea. The only ones I saw were those three the entire time I was there. I do remember when I was in there starting to walk down the path, and I stopped in front of one of these units, and I looked in it. It went so far back, and it was so enormous. Like I could have gone in there, and I'm 5'9.5", 5'10". I could have gone in there, stood up inside of it, and it still would have been, the ceiling to these things would have been way above my head. It was just incredible. I've never seen anything like it in my life. That's why people are always like, oh, I found this nest, their nesting site. And then they have pictures of it. I'm like, if you only knew. That might be something temporary, but that is not how these things live. But then they have it like 4 foot plus off the ground. I mean, I never measured it. I didn't know I was going to be going in there, but I would say a good approximation would be 4 foot, maybe a little bit more. And there was just all this brush under it. It started pouring down rain when I was in there. And with all the rain that was in there was not one drop of water. I mean, this thing was airtight. And it almost reminded me of like an illusion on the outside of what it really was. Like nobody would have ever thought that that's what that was. I had driven up and down that road. It was way out in the middle of like 100 acres of growing fields, for like corn or beans or whatever. And it was out in the field.
This is Michigan, right?
Yeah,
Michigan.
it was way out in the middle of like 100 acres of farmland. And it was off by itself. It did look out of place there because all the, the fields would have been plowed. And then there's this big area of nothing but what looked like woods. That's all it looked like. And clearly it was much more than that. But it was almost like the outside gave off an illusion. You would never know it was there. Nobody questioned it. I'd driven by that thing for years, and I saw it from a distance from the road. Never would I have thought that. Never. And when I went up to it that night, I was like, okay, why am I here? Really, what is the purpose I was here? They never told me why I was going. They just wanted me there. And I don't know if I was tranced or what was going on, but it was like I was on autopilot. It's dark outside. There's no light other than a little bit from the moon. And it was like I knew exactly where I was going, which was to this day. And this happened many, many years ago. To this day, I've never been able to figure out what really went on that night because I was like going through the fields and going through brush and it's like I knew where I was supposed to go, but I'd never been there before. And then when I got up to it, it just looked like dense woods, but I literally could not find a spot that I could even squeeze in to get into it. And I'd been out in the woods my whole life. I mean, I go out in the woods, and anybody that's been out there with me, I go through the woods like a hot knife and butter. I mean, they get talking to me and wanting me a certain place, and it's like, I'm just zooming, I'm gone. And everybody's like, okay, there she goes again. And it doesn't faze them. I could not get inside of that. It was absolutely impossible. You couldn't even get a foot in there because everything was so thick. You couldn't see into it. It was crazy. I'll never forget that. But then she just said, put your hand on a bush. And I was like, okay. And I did. Next thing you know, I'm standing on the inside. But the only room to move around in was simply that trail that went around it. There was no excess room. There was no place to walk around. And I just kept thinking, if this is a deer run, which is what it looked like, only a little bit taller, how in the world, if a deer ran through, there would literally be nowhere for me to go. I would have gotten plowed over because you couldn't go out through the bushes because you couldn't get in through the bushes. And on the other side were these units that they slept in, you know, so it's like there's nowhere for you to go. And that was when I started feeling like something was behind me, and I turned around, and they were not like right on top of me. I would say they were a good 10 to 15 feet away from me. Like, you know, it's not like they were standing on top of me. It was like where I came in at, they were standing. If I would have looked the other way, they were right there. I don't even know how they got there, because when I came into it, I never saw them. They weren't there. And then all of a sudden they were. You know, it was just really bizarre. I never saw any other ones other than those three. But I never felt like that was all that was in there either. I just never saw them, never heard them, nothing.
So this, excuse me, this particular group that you were interacting with, what do they look like? Tell us about their facial features
Well,
and what you saw.
okay, the ones that were actually at this particular house that I lived at, um, I was not as close to them as I was the one um, on the western side of Michigan. Those, I mean, that was normal to see them uncloaked walking around my yard all day long. That was a normal thing. I would go out and sit out with them every night. This was prior to that. And they would come, you know, they tall, bulky, you know, shaggy haired. We had red ones, we had brown ones. The ones that were actually there that night, the male was quite large. He did have a slight cone to his head, you know, very broad faced. He had more of the hair like across here and around here, but yet his cheeks were bare. The eyebrows, he had hair in the eyebrows, but his forehead was bare. The female had more hair. She seemed to have much more hair on her face. Her hair was much longer, much straighter, and it was kind of like a blondish red color, but not really a strawberry blonde, but it was the lighter. The little girl looked a lot like her mom. You know, I think she had a little less hair on her face, and of course it wasn't as long as her mom, but she looked a lot more like mom than she did dad. I mean, I'm assuming that that was dad that was there, because they, you know, they stayed right together. They were not going to be separated at all. He was massive. The mom was big. You know, I noticed that she seemed to be like, her hips were broader than the dad's was, but he was obviously much more muscular. The little girl, I would say her size would be the same size as maybe a 6-year-old of ours. And she clearly was not 6, because she would have been a whole lot bigger. And she was just kind of like standing there, and she'd stop and she'd look up at her mom, like making sure everything was okay. I didn't feel like she was nervous. I didn't like she was upset. I think she was very curious. You know, why is this person in here where I normally am at? But she never said anything. She would just look at me, and then she'd look at her mom. She didn't pay too much attention to the dad. She was more concerned with what was going on with mom. And the mom was the one that would mind speak. I don't remember hearing anything from dad. I don't recall him ever saying anything. I just remember the female. And when she mind spoke, it was very soft. It was very calming. I mean, it really was. It was like somebody giving you a hug. The whole situation should have been extremely stressful. And it wasn't. It was lovely. That's why I say, you know, they have the ability to trance us and still have us be able to move around and be calm. And in my opinion, which I didn't know that back then, I learned it later, that's exactly what they did. Because when I was at home, my kids were in bed for the night. You know, I was in pajamas watching TV, and next thing I know, I have to be out in the woods. Like, my life depended on it. Like, I had to be out in that woods. And I called a babysitter at 11:30, 12 o'clock at night. My girlfriend's daughter babysat for me, and she was like, oh, okay. And then she found out what I was going to do, and she wanted to go. So her sister came over and stayed with my kids, and her and another friend of mine went with me out in the woods, and I didn't want them to go. Everything in me kept saying, no, they can't go. No, they can't go. No, they can't go. And they're like, there is no way we're letting you go out in the middle of the night, in the dark. And the area that I lived in Michigan, there was coyotes, there was wolves, there were bears. I mean, you know, we had the black panthers, which we saw one that night, but it didn't bother us. And so it really wasn't a wise idea for me to be out, especially going, like, driving down the road and seeing that area is one thing. It's another thing to be out, you know, on 100 or 200 acres of land by yourself in the middle of the dark, you know, that you've never been. And we got out there, and we had to cross several farmers' fields to get there. It wasn't, I mean, by the time we got back there, we had to cut through all this land, farmland, and then go towards the back and then all around. And it was a good, you know, couple mile trip to get back there. So it's not like it was this easy jaunt. And it was like I was driven. There was no way I wasn't going, and I knew exactly where I was going to go. And I remember thinking to myself while it was happening, what am I doing? But it was like I had no control over it. I was just doing what I was supposed to do. And then I got in there, and I don't know how long I was in there. I don't think it was real long. I didn't feel like it. But again, I was like on autopilot. I felt no fear. I felt nothing but calmness, which is insane. I shouldn't have been calm, you know, because it was all so crazy. But even when I saw them, I was like, oh, okay. You know, and they said, do this. Okay, no problem. You know, it definitely interesting. And I remember when I walked up to it thinking, God, I just want to climb inside of it, you know? And then I'm thinking, no, that's not what I'm going to do. So whether it came from them that I shouldn't climb in it or common sense, I don't know. But I didn't attempt it. I don't think I could have, to be honest with you, because that thing was at least 4 foot off the ground. There would have been nothing to stand on to pull myself up to get in it. What shocked me and still does is the intricacy of how all of these branches and foliage were woven. They were not stacked. These things were woven. Like they weren't going to go anywhere. They weren't going to fall apart. You weren't going to tip one of them over. These things were solid. But when I looked at how it was constructed, it wasn't piled on. It was woven. I mean, you have to have hands to do this. It wasn't a pile of brush. And then as I looked inside of it, you would find like the pine branches or branches with leaves on it or piles of leaves, almost like it was cushioned towards the back of it, not at the front, but towards the back. The front of it had more of the branches. So it was really incredible. I mean, never have I seen anything like that, you know, before or since then.
Now, this is the lower peninsula of Michigan, correct?
This is, yeah, it's not in the upper peninsula, but if you were like to look at the mitten, you know how you look at it because Michigan's a mitten, it was above mid-Michigan. It wasn't as high as to get in the upper peninsula. This is
So
over.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
What? No, I mean, you're talking like, I'm trying to think the best way. I don't like to give locations, but it really was more like past the middle section. You're definitely up past the middle section of Michigan. Somewhere like halfway between mid-Michigan and the upper part of Michigan before you would cross the straits.
Right. I was curious to know if it was near any, again, you don't have to name, but was it near any state or national forests? I'm just interested
There
in this
really wasn't.
region.
Yeah, no, there really wasn't. It was I will say it was in Shiawassee County. So, I mean, that's a very large county, so it's not specific, but it was in Shiawassee County and lots of woods. You know, I mean, I was born and raised in Flint, Michigan, and I'll be honest with you, when I was a kid, they were there. You know, they were. Of course, they've seen them in Detroit, but I was born and raised, not raised till I was 5 in Flint, and they had them down there. Not a lot of them, but they were definitely there because I would see them. You know, I would go outside and go to the end of our little road, and there was woods there, and that's where they were. So, you know, and they were very active there. When I moved later on, and I moved out to Shiawassee County, we had everything out there. I mean, we had UFOs coming and going out of there, and Sasquatch running around all the time. We had the panthers, we had wolves. I mean, it was just crazy where we were at. And I can remember my godchildren, when they were at the house, as they got older, one of them called me and said, Aunt Robin, it was really real, wasn't it? And I said, what do you mean, babe? And he said, the monkey people. And I said, what monkey people? And he said, they used to run around the front yard. Like when we looked out the window, they were out there, and I said, well, and I had to go through, well, there are people. And I went through, and he's like, I said, but yeah, honey, it was all real. And he said, they didn't scare me. He said, they never tried to hurt me. He said, for years, he said, I thought it was a dream. He said, it was really real. And I'm like, yeah, it was real.
So let's shift down to the Carolinas. So when
Yeah.
you got into the Carolinas, did you ever have an experience with that was similar to that, where you were actually in their
No.
their house?
The thing here is, and the reason why I'm moving, because I just can't do it anymore. I am used to being out in the woods daily. That's what gives me peace. That's what keeps me centered. And I can deal with a lot if I have that tranquility of being out in the woods. I like to hug trees. I like to be out in nature. I go out there and sit with them. I've done that for years, just gone out at night and just sit out there with them. And you can't do that here. The venomous snake population is more than the people, and it's absolutely insane. And where I'm at, I'm in the forest on a 2-track, and right up the road is a swamp. So, and for whatever reason, I've never seen so many timber rattlesnakes in my life. Like, we get diamondbacks, we get the timbers, water moccasins, copperheads. I mean, you name it, and it's here. It's absolutely nuts. And you go drive up and down the road, and the timber rattlers are out laying in the road sunning themselves. I mean, it's just insane. And so I don't go out there. I mean, I go other places and I'm out in the woods all the time. I'll walk back to the tree lines, but there's so much, because it's a pine tree forest, there's so much mulch on the ground, and they're hiding under the mulch.
Right.
The one neighbor on one side, she's lost 2 dogs from snake bite. The other side, they've had dogs that have died from snake bite. And then across from the road from me is a 250-acre pine tree farm and another lake. So you can't get away from. You just can't. And I don't even try. They come up to the house, they're peeking in the window, they're pounding on the window, they're walking across the front yard, they're playing with the dogs when the dogs are out. So I really don't have to go in there. They seem to be quite friendly. They're very eager to come out, stand outside the window, stand on the other side of the wall of my bedroom, which my bedroom is the only bedroom on the first floor. The rest of them are upstairs. And stand on the other side of the wall and tap, or tap on the windows or whatever. So they are very active. I've never tried to go out there. Of course, that night I was in Michigan. I wasn't trying to go out there. I was sitting at home when they wanted me out there. The other place that I lived in Michigan, they would want me out there, and I did follow them. I was invited to where they lived, but they lived in an area. There was an old doctor there that had all this land, and there were Native American burial grounds on it, and he had this intense fence, and he had to have known they were there. He had to, because I've never seen this kind of fencing. I mean, this was the strongest fencing I've ever seen in my life. The entire acres were fenced off like that, and every 10 to 15 feet were a posted sign that said that unless you had written permission, military or police permission, you could not be on that property, and that anybody would be shot. I've never in my life seen that. So he knew what was over there. I mean, it was that intense. I've never seen that in my life. And it said right on the sign, anybody caught there and you didn't have that paper on it would be arrested. I mean, it was really intense, and the security on that, cameras everywhere, absolutely everywhere. So they knew what was on there. So, I would follow them and they'd want me to go in there. And of course I wasn't going to try it. So I knew that's where they lived at, but I never did get back there. Temporary shelters, they'll make temporary shelters all over the place. We see the little nests, and we see the teepees, and, various things, or large areas where you can see where they bedded down in it, but that's really not where the housing situation is.
So I have never heard such a description before of where
Yeah.
these creatures reside as far as housing goes. That's the most
Oh, it's
vivid description
intense.
I've ever heard. And given that experience, did that make you see tree structures in a different light?
You know, it's really weird. Not, I'm going to be honest and say not really, because from the time I was little enough to realize that they were all, coming out while I was playing, I have always, and when I say always, I mean like 4 and 5 years old, looked for tree structures. Who in the world does that at 4 and 5 years old? I didn't know the meaning of all of them at that time, but I would look for them. And I would go and stand at the tree line and I'd watch them walking around in there and I'd be looking for structures. Everywhere I went, I looked for structures. And I remember saying to my mom one time, I was like 5, 6 years old, and I had asked my parents multiple times if they knew anything about Sasquatch, and they didn't know what I was talking about. Back then, Patterson Gimlin really hadn't hit in a big way. There were no books about it. And I would ask them about tree structures, and they didn't know what to say to me. I mean, they were kind. They were never like, you're making anything up. And they would be like, we're sorry, but we don't know what to tell you. So I just always, if I drove down the road with my parents, I was looking for tree structures, always. I was either looking for them to be running in the woods, or did I see tree structures on the side of the woods? And my parents would always ask me, what are you looking for? Like every time we go anywhere, you're like plastered with your face up against the window, staring at the side of the road. And it was always them I was looking for, or a structure, and it was just something that was just part of my daily thing. Like if I went anywhere, a friend of mine, they had like 20 acres and a pond, and a group of us would go over there at times to swim and play or whatever. Everybody would be enjoying themselves in the pond, and there would be me walking across all the pastures back to the tree line, and I'm scouring the tree line. I had a real good friend that I went to high school with and junior high with. And when we were in junior high, I took her out in the woods, and it was the same thing there. And she still remembers to this day, the day that I showed her the Sasquatch. And she's like, they were really there. Like, you showed them to me. And that memory I had forgotten. Honestly, I forgot all about it till she brought it up to me a few years ago. So, I mean, it was just, I don't think it was that it was me. I think it was all directed from them. I really do, because I was a kid. Why would I know anything about those? Like, I knew things about them when I was little. That why? It made no sense. Why am I looking for stick structures? Why, when every time I was outside, for some unknown reason, I'm looking at the ground for footprints? Footprints from what? I was a little kid. I didn't know what I was looking for. It's just all been directed by them. I mean, I feel blessed, don't get me wrong, but none of it made sense. Nothing in my life has ever made sense. And why they allowed me to go to where they lived at, to this day, I have no idea. I mean, they've never told me why. I don't know, was it a test to see if I would keep the secret, which I did. I never told anybody till probably maybe 15, 20 years after it happened. I never told a soul. I didn't tell my friends that were with me that night. I got out of there and they said, oh, there you are. And I'm like, yeah, I said, I'm tired. I want to go back home now. And they're like, you're the one that wanted to come out here. And I'm like, nope, I'm good. I want to go back home. And we went home and I never said a thing. So if it was a test, I passed. But why, I don't know. At that time, while they were around me and I interacted, I did not interact at the level that I did on the western side of Michigan. That was off the charts. That was crazy. But the ones at that time, they would be around my yard. I had chickens. They'd come in and they knew they could take the eggs. I'd just say, leave me half of them. So I always had eggs in the morning for my kids. And, we would see them running around the yard all the time. They were mind speaking. They've always mind spoke. And they were around, but it was good communication, good interaction, but not like it was in the western side of the state. I mean, that took it to a whole new level. But yet they were the ones that showed me where they lived.
So, Robin Haynes, thanks so much for the chat tonight. Before we go, I love talking to you because you always have such fascinating stories and
Okay.
fascinating experiences. And every time we talk to you, we learn more and more. So not only are you our partner in CWR research or consultant and a big part of the CWR network, but you also have your own website,
I do.
paranormal-empowerment.com. So before we go, tell our viewers about your website. Tell our viewers what you do.
Okay. What I do on the website, and right now it's been really busy. I've been very blessed. I teach frequency work, energy work, how to strengthen your connection not only with the earth, but with the cryptids, mind speak, how to read energy signatures. I work with UFO abductees as well as giving information as far as that goes, because I've been abducted on and off my entire life. I talk to spirits for people if they need me to. I do psychic work. I hate the term psychic, so I say intuitive, but it's what it is. Anything paranormal, I work with people on. Right now, because of the energy shift that we are undergoing right now on this planet, a lot of people are getting triggered. A lot of people are feeling like there's a purpose that they have in this field, but they don't know what it is. So I kind of act like a guide to get them where they need to go. If they have abilities, I work with them and how to get them active, and it all starts with frequency and energy. If you can't do the frequency and energy, you're only going to go so far. And so I just kind of pull it all together for them. And I have to be honest with you, I have the best clients. I have the absolute best clients. They end up being more like family than clients. And I do things a little bit differently than a lot of people as far as making myself available even after the sessions. I just kind of, and it's just because if you're paying for a session, you think you get all this information, and then after the session, you come up with even more questions than you had before. And I don't feel it's right to have to pay for information on a session you've already paid for. So I just make myself available for them to be able to text me, call me, contact me 7 days a week. And get those answers. They don't need to book another session for it. I just think that that's ridiculous. They've already paid for the session. So we have a lot of fun. We learn a lot, and they end up just turning into some of the dearest people I've ever met. Like, I'm really humbled and blessed by them. It's incredible. So it's going good. Like I said, people are amazing. They really are. And everybody has abilities. They do. Everybody can learn mind speak. Everybody can learn to move energy and use it wisely, so that if you're in a situation where there's a lot of negativity in the dark energy, you can change that, and make it better. You can use it as a protection. And all of these cryptids are energy and frequency based. If you don't know how to get your frequency up, they're not coming near you. They're just not going to. It makes them physically ill to be around anything that's negative, not pure of heart or dark. They don't like it. They don't want anything to do with it.
All right. For those of you that are interested, check out Robin Haynes' website at www.paranormal-empowerment.com. Upcoming for CWR, October 15th at the Anchorage Museum. The entire month of October is Sasquatch month at the Anchorage Museum.
Yes.
October 15th is Trail Tales, sponsored by Alaska Trails in partnership with the Anchorage Museum. Myself, as well as CWR research consultant Paul Ayot, will be there. That's October 15th at 7 p.m. If you're interested, we will be on the stage there with several other researchers and given a speech. I'll be giving the speech. Paul will be there networking for us. So stop by if you get a chance. That's Tuesday, October 15th at 7 p.m. at the Anchorage Museum in downtown Anchorage. So for CWR team members, Matt Slater, Paul Ayot, myself, Robin Haynes, and those in our CWR network, thank you so much for tuning in, and we will see you next time. Have a good night.
Night, everybody.